Hello, folks. We're going to get started again. We have two more folks here to testify, and we'll start with Bobby Sakmann of Live On New York, and she'll be followed by Stephen Choi from the New York Immigration Coalition.
Certainly. All right.
You could have my chocolate.
Thank you.
I was told to bring a lot of copies.
We will hand them out.
Definitely don't want to carry.
You're okay on time.
Okay, thank you. All right. Oh, sorry. My name is Bobby Sakmann. I'm the Director of Public Policy. That's perfect. At Live On New York. Live On New York is the umbrella group that represents the community-based senior services across the city. We have about 100 nonprofit members who deliver services to about 300,000 older New Yorkers through senior centers and NORCs, housing, transportation, elder abuse services. The list sort of goes on and on. And so I'm pleased today to be able to testify. The other piece of what we do, which is in the packet, is we have a very robust outreach and enrollment program to help seniors get on benefits like SNAP, SCREE, Medicaid. So please, we go all over the city. We have a hotline. We have a team of social workers in our office that takes the seniors soup to nuts. They can even do it over the phone. So please keep that in mind. So the first thing I want to raise today is actually not the city budget. It's Title 20, which I think some of you are probably aware of. The governor put in his budget a shifting of language that would cut $17 million from senior centers in New York City. 65 centers, according to the Department for the Aging, are threatened to close. 6,000 seniors a day would lose their center. 1.5 million meals a year would be lost, and 24,000 hours of case assistance to help people get benefits or other kinds of assistance would be gone. We have no idea why the governor is doing this. Obviously, there's some pure politics going on here too, but I'm afraid that they're putting senior centers in a political football position. And I have to let you know that in 2 weeks, and here's the latest number hot off the press, 13,747 letters from 104 senior centers across the city have gone to Governor Cuomo in English, Spanish, and Chinese. 13,747 letters from 104 senior centers. And I had a lower number at the beginning of today. We're tracking it. So he heard, he ignored over 13,000, almost 14,000 seniors in 2 weeks. So obviously there's a lot of concern out there. Manhattan had about 3,000 letters go out in particular. So the borough president's been very helpful in trying to get a letter from all the BPs together to get out, and hopefully that will be out soon. So the preliminary budget, you have in your packet a copy of a coalition of aging advocates came together, about 7 of us, as you'll see, and Margaret Chin, the aging chair of City Council, has called this the Year of the Senior, because last year at the handshake of the budget, they called it the Year of Youth. And we decided it's about time there was a Year of the Senior, considering the demographics of the city. And I want to just say something about what's going on in New York City and aging, and you probably know some of this well. The numbers are growing rapidly. At some point, not in the far future, there's actually going to be more people who are old than kids, than young people. And the city should welcome that. It means we're living longer. And seniors aren't helpless, but they may need help. And there's a difference there in the way of thinking about people. So whether it's through community-based services or other kinds of programs, there's a real momentum when you get old. There's things you can do that you didn't do when you were younger. They're still very engaged in their communities. They bring in Social Security. Billions of dollars come into communities because of senior citizens. So they're anchors in communities. And there should be an interest in keeping them there. And so the community-based service side of things is actually a solution, many solutions, but it's historically been underfunded. The mayor's preliminary budget did nothing for the Department for the Aging. There was $4.3 million put in, and we'll come back to it in a moment, for home care. He actually put that in a November plan. It doesn't buy one new hour of home care. If the money hadn't been put in, people would have lost hours. This is for people over Medicaid. And so there are now, or as of December, there are almost 600 seniors waiting for home care. I don't know how you wait for home care. And the mayor didn't even baseline that money. And there's over 1,800 people, you have the lists there broken out by council district, waiting for case management. And that's basically a social worker going into your home and assessing you. So if you're sitting on a list of, to wait for a case manager, you can't get assessed for home care. So you're in the rabbit hole of waiting lists. You can get a home-delivered meal, though. That they'll turn on right away if you need it. So we have thousands of seniors around this city who are just sitting on waiting lists. This administration has not done anything for this group of people. And so we're asking for $9 million. That's actually a number we got sort of from the city that would address the home care problem. And we're asking for $5 million for case management. There's so much catch-up to do. Under Bloomberg, we lost 1/3 of all city funding at DFTA, which was about $55 million. So DFTA's budget is less than 1%, I'm sorry, less than half of 1% of the city's budget, despite the fact that older adults are now comprising more than 18% of the city's population. So talk about being behind. The other things you'll see in there, and I'm not going to go into all the details, it's a multi-year plan. That's why there's a lot of charts. So the first part of it is to get money baselined. We're still caught very much in the budget dance, and every year we have to fight for the same money. And so there's almost $16 million for NORCs, for adult daycare, for a whole variety, for home care, as I just mentioned, and other programs. And then there's an additional almost $45 million ask for the same kinds of services because we're behind, for transportation, for home-delivered meals, case management, and for caregivers. I want to just mention caregivers for one moment. So aging is, I know I'm now talking to 3 men, and I'm about to tell you that aging is a woman's issue. So you'll forgive me. Obviously, we hope all men grow old.
It's all our issue.
You know, right. And the future is female, they keep saying, right? And so, but there are, you know, the data does show that most older adults are women. Most poor older adults are women, and most older adults living alone are women, you know, more to the point of who actually uses the services. And the family caregivers are mostly women. You know, when the city passed paid leave, that was a great thing. But the caregivers are the ones who may actually have to leave their jobs. And we're not doing anything. There's not one city dime to support family caregivers. And we've been asking for $4 million. The city hasn't done anything. And I want to just put this in a little perspective. If you look at what the city has done at the younger end of life over the last 3 years, it's all good. There's been UPK, there's the school day, big investment in after-school programs. So if you're a young mother, I'm not saying there's not challenges, I'm not romanticizing, but conceivably, you can now go to work, maybe get an education or take care of other kids and your responsibilities. Fast forward to the woman who's about 50 and over, who's caregiving, and then maybe even older who needs care. There's no social safety net. Nothing like that is there. And that's why women leave the workforce. And we think that access to affordable elder care is the workforce issue of the 21st century for women. So I'm trying to just put, you know, these everyday services we talk about, give it a context of the importance of it. The dollar figures you can see, they're before you. The other thing I do want to touch on is, I just want one more thing about home care, is that back in August, which in the second month of the fiscal year, the DFTA let the case management providers know that they were freezing home care for the unforeseeable future. So that's why we have almost 600 people already on. There's no money. And that was the second month of the fiscal year. There's no plan. So the other thing I wanted to mention, because of the times that we're in, is about immigration and immigrants. And I see Stephen is going to follow me, and I'm really glad you're here to hear what I have to say. First of all, senior centers, NORCs, all these community-based services serve thousands of elderly immigrants. Nobody asks documentation. They're just on the front lines every day. So, first of all, we want to make sure that elderly immigrants are being thought of, because they've got to be terrified as everybody else is right now. What are their needs, social, legal, etc.? Also, use us, because we could get the word out to elderly immigrants who could then go to their family members. And whatever the resources or the information is needed, not only provided for older immigrants, but use them to get to family members and others in their community. And now is a time, you know, we obviously all need to stand strongly together, but our network really, forever has served immigrants, and those numbers are really growing day by day, who comes to the senior centers, et cetera. So I just wanted to point that out, again, to give it a little bit broader context. And then my final thing is, as you might know, the Human Services Council is doing great work on a 12% increase across the board, basically for administrative overhead, salaries, fringe benefits, because nonprofits are dying on the vine. And so we support that effort, because we can't do any of this work if we don't have enough money to run an organization. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you. We probably have some questions for you.
Sure, I'm sorry.
The first question I have, excuse me, is on your non-preliminary budget comment on the Title 20 funding. Governor Cuomo was cutting Title 20, or wanted to cut Title 20 in 2011.
Correct.
And here we are again, just a few years later. What are the strategies you think we can do to protect that funding so we're not going into this issue again in 3 or 4 years?
That's actually a really good question, because we don't know even what's going to happen with Title 20. It's federal funding. He's doing this before the feds propose a cut to it. So the problem is the language. It's considered discretionary. I don't know if that's a state rule or a federal rule, actually, but that's how it's been. So domestic violence, adult protective services, and child care are mandated services under Title 20. Senior centers are considered discretionary, except for at least 35 years the money's been in the budget of senior centers, so it's a long-term relationship. So either we convince the governor to keep the language, and if it is a state rule, maybe there's a way to mandate it. Or at some point, we need to figure out a way that $17 million is going to be baseline. We can't go through this year after year. I think that the state has a responsibility to have skin in the game for senior centers. Actually, the state has the smallest amount of DFTA's budget comes from the state. Its city is the biggest, federal, and then state. So they're already way behind. So I don't have anything, you know, unfortunately specific, but it's that discretionary language that gets us in trouble.
Sure. And then coming back to the city, certainly thank you for the wealth of information you provided for us to review. The numbers seem so small, right? When you think about it, $17 million is going to shut down 65 senior
Right.
centers. You know, by comparison, when you look at the cost for other things, they're astronomical.
Right.
Senior centers don't seem to cost as much as other things, but have an incredible impact. There was a report that came out a couple months ago that talked about the disparity of funding going towards senior
Right.
centers. I don't know if you had a chance to read the report or see the New York Times article on
Right.
that. You know, but how can we ensure that senior centers are being equitably funded, but also to make sure that we continue to provide them with the needs that they have,
Right.
especially when, you know, ROI, return on investment, is pretty amazing.
That's a really good question. We actually believe that based on size, sort of prorating, that the budget should be $750,000 for a senior center, and it's way below. I think it's averages between about $400,000 and $500,000. There are 16 innovative senior centers, and their budget tends to be around $750,000. They're purposefully, I mean, that was the whole idea, that they were going to be funded more richly. Actually, that idea came from my organization. And so and that doesn't include rent, because rent's very individual. But So if you really want the health outcomes and preventing social isolation and all of that really good stuff, we have to pay for it. There was also a study that through DIFTA done by Manoj Pardasani, who is a professor at the Fordham School of Social Work. It was released somewhere in the last year, not that long ago, showing the health outcomes of senior centers. I could certainly get you a copy of it. It's a great report, and it's showing, and it's self-reported from the seniors themselves, how through the exercise classes and the art classes and having a peer community, their health is literally better, and learning how to eat better. You know, they literally feel better and they are better. So there's a health value to social services. But the state, they've never been willing to fund it. It's always like, do your best with what you have, you know. And the other problem we run into is the whole capital side, because many of the senior centers are located in churches and synagogues, often in the basement. They can't get capital dollars because of the whole church state. I mean, I heard an example in Brooklyn where the assemblyman was on the state level was trying to get capital dollars. Senior centers in a church, the roof's not doing very well, and they won't let them fix the roof because they consider it a benefit to the church. So you end up in this no-win situation, and DFTA doesn't have enough of an expense budget to cover the costs of what they need around the city. And some of them aren't handicapped accessible. Some of them probably need to be updated even in terms of kitchens, you know, that kind of thing. The study that you mentioned that showed the disparity, there is a history to it. Mostly the history is that you got to be around as long as I am to remember this. The senior centers, some of them used to be under HRA. And they actually were called Title 20 senior centers then. That's why I know this goes far back. And they started with higher budgets than the Department for the Aging senior centers. Eventually, David Dinkins moved them all over to DFTA. But this history of a disparity never was addressed. I think that it was a very good report. I think the challenge we face is how do you lift all boats? I think that is the challenge, because not only is some suffering, you know, obviously from being underfunded, but no senior center pretty much has what they need. And you know, senior centers aren't for everybody, obviously. But the stories of transformation of lives of people who do go to senior centers are just endless. So, you know, to keep that, you know. Does that answer your question? Okay.
Yeah, I do have a question. And it may not be an answerable question, but I am that nerd that goes to every single session of the budget consultations for the Borough of Manhattan at the Office of Management and Budget, and year after year, certainly under the current administration, one by one the agencies say, no, you don't need to advocate for us. We, the community boards, you don't need to advocate for us. We're good with what we have. And DFTA has been among those who, even when pushed, won't identify a program. You've just given us a couple of things to identify. Are these not shared priorities that you're advocating for, or is it that something else is going on?
No, actually they are. I have to say it because I know the commissioner very well. They are shared priorities. I don't know why. I think DFTA is not held in high esteem by the mayor, by OMB. It's a very small city agency. It's about 300-something million, which, you know, obviously for city agency, I mean, it's not nothing, but that's city, state, and federal dollars. And aging hasn't been a priority. So I think they have a really hard time internally advocating. So caught between a rock and a hard place a little bit. I do know the commissioner is very interested in funding the senior centers. She pushed that whole salary parity last year for case management. I mean, that started with her, to be honest. So another issue which I haven't put much attention on, but which is a priority that I know she agrees with because we've talked about it, is adult daycare. Not all those pop-ups and whatever we hear about, but the real thing. When I talked before about the social safety net for, let's say, women, you know, working and then their loved ones they're taking care of, there's a dearth of social adult daycare, which is basically for seniors above the Medicaid level. And it costs about $80 to $100 a day to provide the service because there's transportation. So most families obviously can't really afford that. So this would be to pay for the staff and subsidize, seniors going. There's a story of a woman who somehow gets her parent from Jamaica, Queens, literally to Ridgewood or to Bushwick every day. I don't know how she does it. Our goal would be that there should be a social adult daycare in every CD in this city, fully funded. And I know the commissioner agrees with that because we've had that conversation. But I don't know what happens when she needs to speak out. I just don't, because we've heard that before. I've heard it from city council as well, so I just don't know why she takes that position. You can't sit here, you can't have waiting lists right in front of you and say we don't have any new needs. So.
Well, if it's any comfort, we don't buy it when they say it.
Right, but it doesn't help.
I guess we're lucky to have you, so thanks.
Okay.
Bobby, you mentioned CD. Were you talking about council district or community district?
I was referring actually to community district.
Community district.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Is there any, okay. Well, thank you. On
Thank you
behalf
very
of
much.
1.5 million people over the age of 60 now.
Thanks, Bobby. We'll have Stephen Choi next. And if you have testimony, Steve, we'll take it up here. But if you don't,
Yes.
we're happy to just hear you.
Yes. Thank you and good evening. I appreciate the opportunity to speak in front of you about some of the needs that we face in terms of immigrant communities here in New York and also for Manhattan as well. I want to take this opportunity actually to thank Manhattan Borough President Gail Brewer, who has been such a consistent force for immigrants every time we've had an event or mobilization or rally or going down to JFK. Manhattan Borough President Gail Brewer has been there, so I want to recognize that just for so much of the tremendous support she's given. So I'm here today to talk about some of the needs that we face, not only for Manhattan's immigrants, but also for immigrants all across New York City. We face an unprecedented moment in this city's history and really this nation's history. When we think about the fact that we now have, as President of the United States, a man who, as a candidate, ran the single most anti-immigrant campaign in the history of the United States. Somebody who called Mexicans criminals and rapists, who called for a ban on Muslim immigration, who demonized immigrants in every single turn. And now this man is President of the United States. I'm not sure how some of these things translate into sign language, but I'm hoping that the gist gets across. I want to point out that as president, this man has not changed his tune. And he has declared war on immigrant communities. In his very first week, he passed 4 executive orders that would have created a southern border wall, that unleashed a deportation force, that tried to disassemble our country's historic refugee resettlement system, and that called for a ban on Muslim visitors and really green card holders, a whole host of folks from 7 Muslim majority countries. And he put that into effect immediately. And the kind of impact that this presidency and this administration is going to have, particularly on immigrants in Manhattan, is going to be significant. Manhattan is home to hundreds of thousands of immigrants, whether we are talking about Dominican communities in northern Manhattan, whether we're talking about Chinese communities in Chinatown, whether we're talking about the growing African communities in Little Senegal and some areas in upper Manhattan. There's an incredibly diverse immigrant community in Manhattan. And these immigrants are going to be drastically affected by some of the changes that we are going to see from this administration. We are going to see avenues for legal immigration cut down sharply. The ability to claim asylum is going to be restricted dramatically. The ability of legal permanent residents to petition, and citizens to petition for their family members, is going to be cut. Down on Wall Street and looking at all the businesses, the needs of businesses in terms of immigrants and the H-1B visa system looks to be dramatically cut as well. And of course there is going to be the impact on undocumented immigrants. The fate of DACA recipients is going to be something that is going to be tremendous. There are 50,000 DACA recipients who right now are supposed to be protected from deportation and are also able to work legally. If this president has its way, that may be endangered. And just this past weekend, we saw the impact of what this could be when ICE agents and immigration enforcement agents go all across the city, but in Manhattan as well, seeking not only undocumented immigrants to arrest and detain, but also legal permanent residents are going to be at risk as well. This is going to be huge, and there's potentially going to be millions of immigrants all across New York City who are going to be affected by this. I would say that we as the New York Immigration Coalition are seeking to respond. And the way that we are trying to respond is through a rapid response campaign. We have an 18-month campaign that is titled, "This is Our New York," hashtag Our New York. And the idea is, how do we respond to the needs of New York City's immigrant communities on a number of different ways? There's 6 points to this rapid response plan. Number 1 is community outreach. How do we make sure that we get out there in every single community that we can and let folks know about what are their rights under law, what are their potential remedies as well, and what are the risks that they face? This is absolutely critical because there's so many people who are being targeted by scammers, by fraudulent hucksters who are seeking to take advantage of the most vulnerable folks. Number 2 is legal services. There's going to be a critical need for legal services, for flexible legal services, for all of those folks who are currently in detention, who may never see the light of day in the United States again. It's important that they're going to need a lawyer. Because so often there have been studies that have been shown that if you have an attorney, that helps you actually beat the case and stay with your family. So legal service is going to be absolutely critical for people who are detained, people who are looking to naturalize, and DACA recipients as well, who may be at the risk of losing their status. In addition, hate crimes is another critical piece. There are a documented rise, a very concerning and frightening rise in hate crimes, of course targeting Latinos, of course targeting Muslims, but also targeting anybody who actually looks foreign. In fact, the NYPD told us that Jewish community members were often just as much the focus of some of these hate crimes attacks as Muslim community members. There is a wave of intolerance and fear that is sweeping over this country and really the city as well. And we need to make sure that we are ready to fight back and that the victims of hate crimes are able to get the remedies that they need and the perpetrators are actually brought to justice. We are also going to need to engage in a massive advocacy campaign that seeks to bring together all stakeholders, whether it is bringing thousands of people out to JFK, whether it is mobilizing 20,000 people to send a statement to this administration that New Yorkers believe in an inclusive New York. There's going to have to be a tremendous effort around that as well. A capacity building effort for agencies is also really critical. It is wonderful that so many people are coming out of the woodwork and want to help immigrant communities, want to help immigrant-serving organizations. But they don't have the infrastructure to be able to deal with this huge wave of volunteers. So this 5th part of the 6-part plan is absolutely critical. And finally, I would say that the 6th piece of this strategy, this rapid response campaign, is thinking about how do we build soft power? How do we build bridges between native-born New Yorkers, between folks who are not immigrants and may not necessarily understand exactly what immigrants are going through, but we can reach them and we have the opportunity to be able to build them into our existing base and make those connections and have everybody understand exactly what their immigration history is. And if we can do that, that is going to be tremendous in making sure that we have a strong base and a foundation for our efforts. So that is our 6-part plan that we are launching over the next 18 months titled, "This is Our New York." So I would say that this effort, this rapid response campaign, is actually done in coordination with many of our member agencies. Our goal is to get 85% of the funds out the door to amazing immigrant-led, immigrant-serving agencies like the Chinese Progressive Association, like Cabrini Immigrant Services, like African Services Committee, like the Northern Manhattan Coalition for Immigrant Rights, like the Northern Manhattan Improvement Corporation. These are all our member agencies, and we will work collectively with them, and any support that we are able to receive would be tremendous in making sure that we can strengthen Manhattan's immigrant community and that we can strengthen New York City's immigrant community as well. Thank you very much for this opportunity to testify, and I'm more than happy to answer any questions.
Stephen, thank you. Thank you for your testimony. For the rapid response campaign, have you done a cost estimate of what it will be, what the member organizations are contributing and what you see the city doing, either contributing directly to organizations for the campaign or just sort of bolstering resources at the Mayor's Office of Immigrant Affairs?
Yeah. So that's a great question. And we have done a cost analysis, and we think that this rapid response campaign over 18 months is going to cost about $6 million. And that encompasses all of the 6 parts that we had discussed that I just mentioned. The city, it's going to be important for the city to invest in this. It's going to be important for the mayor to invest in this, and it's also going to be important for the city council to do that as well. I think that the mayor has his own vision with the Mayor's Office of Immigrant Affairs about how he wants to respond to this situation. I think the mayor has made some excellent comments about the importance of New York City being a sanctuary city. But the reality is we're going to need more resources. And what I would say is we need more resources in some of the communities that are the most underserved, and many of them are in Manhattan. We need to make sure that there's a significant presence in Lower Manhattan. Working with the Chinese community, there's not a single Chinese community-led legal services provider actually in all of New York City, let alone in Chinatown and Manhattan. The kinds of resources for the Black immigrant community that is swiftly growing are also extremely limited as well. We have not yet seen the level of investment in the mayor's budget that we want to see, and we did not hear anything specifically about this in the mayor's State of the City address. I do think the city council and the speaker are thinking about ways to respond to this, and I think that we will hear some more details at the speaker's State of the City address tomorrow. Will that come close to meeting the needs? No. So we will do all efforts to make sure that the mayor, the city council, the governor, and the state legislature are making sure that they're putting resources on the table. We're also working very intensively with foundations to put money on the table as well. But this is going to be a big lift. I'm not going to disabuse anyone of that notion.
Sure. Do you have a specific ask for in the fiscal year 18 budget that the city council provide? Is it 5 million of the 6? 4? I'm just curious.
So we do have an ask, but it's really couched as part of it through the city council's own Immigrant Opportunities Initiative, and that is going to be our big push. We were actually seeing that as separate from the This Is Our New York Rapid Response Campaign. Let me tell you why. The City Council's Immigrant Opportunities Initiative, which is actually something that the mayor does and the city council, that provides basic funds to organizations to bring on attorneys and also legal service professionals who may not necessarily be attorneys. So it tries to meet the basic needs that are out there, absolutely important. But what we are saying is that we're trying to focus our ask, and really our ask is around 2 things. One is on supervising attorneys. You can have a bunch of wonderful, well-meaning, new, fresh out of law school attorneys who are going out there doing their best, but there's a surfeit of experienced legal service attorneys who can actually tell them this is the right way and this is the wrong way. So our focus, one of our focuses in terms of legal services ask, is around experienced legal service attorneys, practitioners who can provide guidance. The other ask is around underserved communities. As I mentioned before, the Chinese community, the Black immigrant community, the Mexican immigrant community. These are fast-growing communities that often are not set up to get city council services, but it's absolutely critical to make sure that we're supporting them as well. And I think because we are a coalition and we are used to giving out regrants, we are able to act nimbly to make sure that we are supporting their needs in a way that I think is complementary to that of the city.
Thank you.
Thanks, Steve. I have one question about long-term legal services needs. I know that for your rapid response campaign, $6 million is the totality of all of the pieces. If the city was to invest in scaling up the larger need for legal services for this particular population over a number of years, what's the size of that need?
Yeah. So statewide, we estimate that the need is really on the order of about $25 million. If you think about New York City and the resources that are on the table, and the fact that the need is indeed greatly concentrated in New York City. Really, the need is somewhere around the order of, I would say, about $15 million here in New York City. $15 million a year. And when you think about, there is money out there through existing IOI, through the Mayor's Office of Immigrant Affairs and their Action NYC initiative. It probably meets, I would say, about half that need. So there's a significant need for immigration legal services that's not being met right now that we're going to really need to ramp up. And I think there's going to be a higher need in the future, given the fact that we are going to face deportations. We are going to face folks being detained, and we're going to face a lot of folks who are going to want to naturalize and get that protection of being a citizen.
Thank you.
You covered most of it, what I was going to ask about, but I guess the piece that I'm struggling to understand is how does that fit in with existing services and through organizations like Legal Aid to the extent that they can penetrate, because of course there's no right to counsel in a lot of these hearings and a lot of these proceedings. Does this work with that resource, or how would they work together, or are these supplemental, or how does that work?
So absolutely. I think, Legal Aid is one of the largest providers of legal services, particularly around immigration in the entire city. They do excellent work. There are a number of very strong legal service providers like CUNY Citizenship Now, the Immigrant Defense Project, Legal Aid Society is one of those. The need, though, is still extensive beyond that, and they would be the first ones to tell you that the capacity that they have is maxed out, and their ability to work with more folks is limited as a result of the resources. And so we are just, I would say, we are nowhere near the level of capacity that we would truly need to make sure that immigrants in Manhattan and immigrants in New York City have the kinds of quality, low-cost representation that would really make a difference.
Yeah. So speaking as a lawyer who volunteered to go out and try to help there, and it turns out there isn't a big demand for copyright lawyers at the airport. No one seems to be fleeing because of infringement. The thought occurs that if there could be a companion program to help the wave of volunteerism that I think you referenced earlier to translate into acquiring some skills that could be useful to real folks in real time. Is there anything like that in the
Yes.
pipeline, and what would that cost?
That's a great question. So that is absolutely part, actually, of our rapid response plan. There is, and I think we actually ran the JFK table, and we called it No Ban JFK, hashtag No Ban JFK. But it was a tremendous lift for us. We ran a around-the-clock, 24-hour, 10-day legal services table at JFK, where we came in and we created a technology table and a check-in table, and this group of lawyers was doing habeas petitions, and it was tremendous. The amount of lawyers who came out from law firms, the amount of lawyers who came out from legal service organizations, the response was great. And I do think there's a lesson in there. One of the key gaps, I think, is really the ability to engage the private bar, to train them on some of these really difficult cases. To do an asylum claim takes years, and it takes a specific kind of expertise. To go in to a meeting with ICE, with someone who is going in, potentially being detained right there and then, that requires a certain kind of knowledge about the process, about the underlying substantive law. So that is something that we are ready to take on, and we are trying to engage in, using that No Ban JFK legal table as a model. Because so many attorneys came out, we want to build on that and say, let's create a model in which we are working with the larger private bar, training them about immigration law, making sure that they're ready to be plugged in to provide services to people who are detained, to people who are in deportation proceedings, to DACA folks as well. That is something that we are actually actively envisioning is a central part of our legal services response as part of the rapid response campaign.
Thanks. That's very helpful.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We're going to take another break as we allow for more folks to come in, and we will reconvene as soon as we have more participants. Thank you.